button. And we got it. And hello, I want to welcome you all to the Finance Committee meeting for the MAPC on February 10th. I'm Sam Seidel. I'm the chair of the Finance Committee. And the Finance Committee meeting is being conducted remotely via Zoom video conference, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, and as extended by S2475, signed by Governor Baker on June 16, 2021. S2475 also allows town councils, state boards, and other bodies to continue to hold remote public meetings until April 1, 2022. To provide public access to the meeting while limiting the potential for abuse of video conferencing technology, i.e. Zoom bombing, members of the public may view the proceedings at https://youtube.com/user/MAPC Metro Boston. With that, let's kick off the meeting. I actually don't remember. Do we take attendance at the meeting typically? I don't know, but here we all are. I'll take any advisement on that. If not, our first matter of business is approval.
You should call the roll.
All right, so let's call the roll. Going across my screen here, Tabor Keeley.
Here.
Yolanda Greaves.
Here.
Sam Seidel here. The committee is present, and we are joined by MAPC executive staff and staff in general, and we recognize them generally. First order of business is the approval of minutes for the May 14, 2021 Finance Committee meeting. Well, first of all, any motion by Tabor?
Second.
Even though I don't remember all of it, I'm pretty sure it looks accurate to me.
It was pretty accurate. It brought back memories.
Yeah.
It was a little while ago. So a second by Yolanda. Any
Yes.
Comments, questions, thoughts, discussion? Hearing none, I will take a roll call vote. Tabor Keeley?
Yes.
Yolanda Greaves?
Yes.
Sam Seidel, yes. Approved unanimously by the Finance Committee. The next item on the agenda is a staffing update. Yes, Mark, sorry, I see your hand.
Sam, if I may just point out the editor's note in regard to the representative from Wellesley. Coletto Frank is, I think, a very talented individual who is a member of the MAPC Council. We are always eager to get people more actively engaged because of her professional work in the finance field. I did approach her as a possible candidate for Finance Committee. She indicated to me after a lot of thoughtful questions and some conversation that her engagement with MAPC is really more focused on her topical interests in the region and in Wellesley, and particularly the issue of transportation. She said she was planning to consider running for executive committee. And Yolanda, I believe that because she knows you, she was going to give you a call or reach out to you to have a conversation about the executive committee. So I just wanted people to be aware of that and hope the appropriate contacts will take place.
The conversation has already happened. I encouraged her to do it. I told her it tied in very nicely to her membership at the regional, the Metro West Regional Collaborative level, and then so I think she'll be stepping up at at the next council meeting to run.
Thank you.
Great.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and thanks to all of you. Of course, we are eagerly welcome new people on the Finance Committee. Not that we don't have a great.
I have to find someone else.
But it was a good approach, and hopefully we'll find that person to join us on the committee. Next up, I think, Mark, I'm going to hand this back to you because we're doing a staffing update. I'm not sure who's going to handle that, but I assume
I'm going to start.
Okay.
The staffing update. So I want to divide this into a couple of parts. I'm going to talk a little bit, but Sheila will talk more about filling positions in the finance team, which is sort of an ongoing process. Some people leave, some people come on. and we're in the midst of that process. But I also want to advise you that Sheila, after how many years? 12?
Almost 13.
Almost 13. NMAPC has decided to step down from her position as Director of Finance. She has given me a date of April 30th. I'm pushing for a little more. I don't know if I'm going to be successful or not, but that's not going to be resolved at this meeting. But on or around the 30th of April will be Sheila's last day. I'm not sure if Sheila is retiring or looking for another job, but I assume at the appropriate moment in time, she will tell me that. And we can wish her all the best in either one of those spheres. You know, people sometimes come to me, this happened a lot with Rebecca, with Jen Garcia, and when a senior trusted advisor at the agency leaves, people come to me and say, oh my God, this must be awful. It must be terrible. How are you going to handle it? And of course, losing someone as talented and committed as Sheila is a blow for us. But I often say, you know what? Sheila's given us 13 years. She owes me nothing. Not everybody has to stay at the agency 37 years, which I think is our current ongoing record. I won't say who. And anyone who contributes, you know, a dozen years to the agency, as some of our recent departing staff has performed a great service to MAPC and a great service to the region, and they deserve to be able to go do something else with their lives. It's the folks who leave after 18 months that bothers me more, even though they might be easier to replace. We have begun the process. Angela Howard, Holly Lewis at the Human Resources team, and Sheila and I have begun the process. I think we have actually almost concluded the process of developing a job description for the new Director of Finance. We will be posting that in the next several days, I think likely on Monday. We have some decisions to make. One of those decisions is whether we're going to go directly to a permanent new finance director, or if we think that's going to take us a little bit more time to see if we can bring on an interim finance director. I have to have conversations with the members of the finance team, including Lourdes, to talk about their futures at the agency and helping to step up and deal with this oncoming issue of a transition in the finance director position. And we also have to consider whether or not we're going to hire a recruiter. I have said that you know, I'm perfectly good at filling planning positions. I know how to do that. I'm not sure I know on my own as well to fill a finance position, a finance director. So, so those are all decisions, you know, those are all ongoing issues. Question of recruiter, having conversations with all other members of the finance staff, which I intend to do, and the question of an interim, those are all open. None of them stand in the way of posting the job, which we're going to do. I want you to be aware that I've discussed this with our auditor, Mike Nelligan at Powers and Sullivan. He's actually provided some input on the job description, which I'm very thankful for. And we are going to, you know, go through the process in as expeditious but thoughtful a manner as possible, because this is a very, very important leadership position at the agency. And I always believe that hiring for finance positions requires twice as much care and attention as hiring for any other positions. And that is a perspective that I've carried with me now, running multiple organizations over a long period of time. I want to take this moment, because the Finance Committee doesn't meet all that frequently, although I might have an opportunity to reprise it later, to thank Sheila and just say she is one of the most committed, talented, and hardworking and effective public servants that I have ever met. She has done a tremendous amount on behalf of the agency and the region at all hours of the day and night, even when I try to get her not to send me emails on Sundays. And MAPC is much stronger as a result of it. We are just concluding the mid-year budget. We'll talk more about that later, but it is a testament to our strength. And that's what the people of the region and the people of the Commonwealth expect. They expect that we will run the organization in a healthy and safe manner to do the work that we are entrusted to do under our statute. And Sheila has been a very big part of that effort, and I want to thank her for that. So that concludes my remarks. See if anyone else has anything to say, but I know Sheila is going to update us on some of the sort of lower level, but nonetheless important staffing issues within the department.
I'll ask committee members if they want to say something. If not, I'll say something. But
I'd just like to say, Sheila, I do appreciate all you did for me while I was in Sam's position, and that was over the top, meeting me in dark parking lots to get checks signed, and all sorts of things. You went above and beyond the call to make things click. And despite all the tutelage from your prior office holder, you came out with and showed off in a stellar form. And I really, you were great at holding my hand through the whole thing, and reminding me of things that needed to be said, and reminding me to keep my mouth shut if I was rambling on. So I do appreciate all you did for me, and I'm only sorry for Sam that you don't get the full benefit. So, but thank you, Sheila, for all you did.
Thank you.
Yolanda, if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I haven't been sitting here that long, but I have always appreciated the thoroughness of the information that we get from Sheila. And even when I ask some questions, because it was all new to me, she was always very open and helpful. So thank you, Sheila, for the short time that I've been here, and good luck with whatever the next step is that you decide to do, but you will be missed here at MAPC.
Yeah, and I'm just going to round it out by saying everything Tabor said, plus. So other than Tabor sort of setting me up for this job by handing over some of his notes from, his council meetings, and this is what you do, and don't worry, it'll be okay. There was always, and then when you get stuck, just ask Sheila. She'll walk you through it. She knows her stuff. And you've done that over and over again. I will, full confession, I don't come from a finance background, so there's a lot of learning for me. And you've been very patient with me, but you always walk me deep in the details and let me ask my 15 million questions. And I have appreciated it so much. And I think the final thing that Tabor said, I agree with as well, which is the fact you're leaving is really going to be tough on me. So we will miss you, but you thank you for your service as well. So those are my comments.
Thank you all for those wonderful words. They're very kind. Thank you very much. Of course, you all know that I'm not one for speeches, so thank you. But Sam, you will do just fine. You have, because you're pretty much leading, our conversations now. So, yes.
Yeah, yes, I agree.
But they're valid questions.
It went from close to zero knowledge to a little bit more knowledge, but that's because you spent time with me. So thank you.
So yes, I have enjoyed my time working with all of you after all these years, and I have learned so much. I have grown so much working at MAPC and working with the entire leadership and with all of you. Yep, I was out. I remember Harry saying to me that when I came to interview, and then many years later, it was two different people because I was quiet as a mouse, even in my interview, and over time, I found my voice. I'm still looking for it most of the time, but I found my voice, and it's through the help of all of you and your support. Okay, so pivoting regarding how the positions within the finance department. I think when we met last May, there was one open position. It was a grant accountant position, which was in the budget. It was not posted at the time, just because we were going through figuring out working remotely and how, how to manage that process with training, bringing a new person on board and everything. But since then, unfortunately, we also lost the AP person back in October, which means that there are now 2 positions open. And obviously, I will be leaving soon. Harry, wow. Harry must be talking about me. The project accountant in the department, Peter Dilsizian, is most likely retiring or reducing his hours towards the end of this fiscal year as well. Hopefully he will stay on to provide additional stability during the transition. So that is the status of the positions here at the finance in the finance department. We currently have a temp grant accountant working, doing a lot of the AP work and working with Peter to learn a lot of what he does with the Homeland Security Department primarily, which turns out transactional information on a very rapid and ongoing basis. And we need to have that stability, that ongoing stability. So that temp person is providing tremendous help in that area. I am going through interviews. The grant accountant position is posted. I also posted a staff accountant position, which is more on the account. It's a lower position, more on the accounting side, processing AP, doing filing, doing cash receipts, all of those things. Whereas the grant accountant position is more working directly with the project managers, helping manage the budgets and setting up projects and assist them. And also, obviously they also need to understand some of the accounting processes, to provide backup when needed and understand, the processes of things or when issues come up. I have had several interviews. A couple of days ago, I had a very promising interview for a grant accountant. I am looking to move forward with that candidate, and we'll see where that goes. That's where we're at right now.
Sheila, I think we have a finalist interview for one of the positions this afternoon. Is that true?
Yes, actually,
Okay.
the temp, the person that's working as a temp has applied for the permanent position. So we
Okay.
are having that finalist interview this afternoon.
So we will do that. I'll do that this afternoon. And Sheila, if you want to advance this other individual, and my schedule is causing a difficulty with that, I will adjust things on my schedule to accommodate that.
Okay.
Because we all know that the nature of the market requires swift action at this moment in time. So
Yes, I just need to have a few words with the other member of the interviewing team just to confirm our thoughts.
good.
I guess if there are any thoughts, questions, comments from committee members on any of this stuff, feel free at this point. I think my goal is to work with everybody on this call to be helpful in this transition. My own sense is that it's a real loss, Sheila, that you're departing on the professional side because just of everything you bring. So I think the goal will be to support Mark and the team and everybody to get the finance team, working like clockwork. So when I have 15 million questions, I can go to somebody and ask. I don't know.
Let's not forget about supporting Lourdes either.
Yes.
And Peter and Tom and everyone else, because transitions are difficult for those of us up above, but they are difficult for the people in the department as well. And we have to be prepared to provide support to all of them as they step up and move us through this transition. I think we're gonna, we'll get to a good place, but it's not without effort, it's not without struggles, it's not without falling down a couple of times. Just part of the way it is. But we're lucky to have some great people on staff And we will work together as a team to try and move through this.
Hearing no other thoughts, comments, questions, are we on to the next item, which is about laptop? Or is there anything else about staffing we wanted to cover? If not, we go on to laptop purchases for the staff, and that's an update from somebody, not sure. Who's going to walk us through
Sheila,
it?
not from me or Lourdes,
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, actually, I was leaving it up to you because you've been more directly to having those conversations. Well, it has come to be, to be realized, seeing that we're essentially going to be in this remote working environment for quite some time, whether it be fully remote, partially remote, just a hybrid version of it, that it has become apparent and quite apparent that it is important for us to provide laptops to all our staff. One of the main reasons for security reasons, because of a lot of the information that we work on, it should not be living on someone's personal laptop. Especially seeing that we've had people come in and going, being able to, if someone is leaving, to be able to access that information for ongoing projects we've had issues recently. So for those reasons, definitely, we thought that it made sense to find a way to provide laptops to all staff. So we procured, I would say, I think about 80 laptops. And we've worked with Dell to make this to finance this over a 5-year period. And it's a 0% finance. Is it a 0? I'm sorry, not quite. It's almost 0% finance, almost 0%, but it's over 5 years. So it is not as huge of a hit on the budget as we initially thought that it would have been. So it's a similar contract lease agreement as we did for the servers, which we did last year as well, that was brought to the Finance Committee as well. So it was the same type of contracting process. That one was 0, this one is almost 0. We pushed to try to see if we could get it to 0, but we got it as low as we could.
Thoughts, questions, comments?
Does it come with service of any sort?
I'm sorry?
Does this include any kind of service, or is this
Yes.
strict? It does. So it's
Yes,
not
it
a, it's not just a leasing program. It's also.
Yes. I can't give you the full details of all of that, but yes, it comes with support as well.
And do we have those laptops now? Have we already received them, or?
No, we haven't received them yet. Dell is going through the imaging process to make sure that they're all ready when they reach us.
Interesting.
And we have a plan for distribution that both takes into account the people who are more senior in the organization, getting them sooner, but also allows the individual directors to provide IT with a plan of who within the department might be the most needy to get them sooner rather than later.
So are some of them being replaced? Because some of the staff have computers from MAPC already, correct or not?
Yes, some of them are being replaced.
Okay.
Some of them are just going to be kept as loaners.
Yep.
Because we still need to have an extra supply of loaners that will be wiped and all of that. Yeah.
So you said 80 laptops. How many staff do you have? How many MAPC staff is there?
Interns are not getting laptops. It's just the
Okay.
So we have about 105.
Okay.
We have about 105 staff and about the 80 staff, 80 to 85 permanent full-time.
Okay.
Does this from a security standpoint, are these going to come with a key for operation for, at least a code. I mean, if people, I assume, will be taking them home and they will be in people's houses, et cetera. I'm just thinking of everybody else is now discovering how open everything is. So I'm just curious as to how is that being dealt with through Dell, or is that some other internal group in our IT department?
Those are technical questions that we will have to get back to you on to know what all the specs are. I mean, you still have to be able to log into the MAPC network in order to access, our information.
I'm pretty confident that Buddy and Tim
Yeah.
are doing what they need to do in order to make sure this is a secure situation. I think it's one of the reasons it's taken a while. But we could get back to you, Tabor, on a few of the specifics. I'm not exactly sure what they are.
Seeing no other questions, comments. Sheila, thank you for that. It seems like a very prudent, well, not a necessary step.
What's the estimated bill for the whole thing?
Each one goes for about $1,200, $1,200 plus, so close to 90.
Over 5 years, you said.
Over 5 years, yes.
Yep.
So it's a monthly cost of, I believe, like $1,600.
Okay.
Which they'll bill us. And, the seeing that we're buying this in bulk and so forth, it will also be capitalized.
Again, this might be more of a technical, and they're coming loaded with all the software licensing that the staff is currently using.
Yes.
Okay.
And MAPC owns them, or do they go back to Dell after X number?
Oh, there's a $1 option to purchase at the end, so we own it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, after 5 years, you're going to want new ones anyway.
Exactly.
Well, Buddy said to me that the processor that they have, I think it's i7s, i9s. I don't know all the technical lingo, but those last for a good 7 to 8 years. So after 5 years, we'll still be able to use them, because we had different options to buy a different operating software, or to do a lease for 3 years and then return it and buy it again, and go through it again, which is more expensive.
Which Dell computer is it? What's the model?
I do not know.
What model computer?
I think she doesn't know, but
Okay.
maybe-
Okay.
But I would say let's press on, because we got to get through
that's
the
fine.
budget. Other questions you can ask Sheila offline, maybe.
Okay.
So thank you for that. Next up on the agenda is the FY23 assessment and approval recommendation by the executive committee. So I think next we're looking at the assessment, and is somebody going to walk us through this in terms of what we're looking at? Or do we just go straight to questions? Does anybody want to speak to the assessment?
I assume this is the maximum
Sheila.
allowable.
Well, the assessment is what we go through each year. We receive the estimated population numbers from DOR. The population numbers on this spreadsheet are as of 2020. And they incorporate, the assessment amount incorporates a 2.5% increase, which is assessed to the 101 cities and towns in MAPC, which amounts to about, I believe it's $46,000 over last year's assessment in total.
And what does the total assessment come to once this is adopted?
1,600,000.
1.9.
Yeah.
13, I believe.
1,000,009.
And do we know, Sheila, I'm not looking at the sheet, although I think a small calculation could probably help determine this. I'm sometimes asked by legislators or town officials what the per capita rate is at the moment. And I know that the legislature reset that back about 6 years ago at, I think, 50 cents. But of course, with the 2.5% increases and population changes, it's changed. Do we know what the current per capita rate is across the region?
Yes, it's at the bottom of the sheet.
Yeah.
Just look at the sheet.
Do I see a 0.5585? Is that correct?
Yeah, point
Yep.
0.558515.
So I'm going to ask the non-knowing person's question. So that's multiplied by your population, and that's what your town is assessed at. Is that accurate? Is that what's happening here? Okay.
I'm sorry,
Adjustment.
my connection
Adjustment.
went. Hear your question.
Oh, you take that number, that 0.5, which I understand to be 55 cents or 56 cents, and you multiply that by your town's population, and that's what your assessment ends up being.
So,
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
Okay.
The population is net of inmate population. And
Right.
there is a prison. Yeah. So that the inmate population is deducted from whatever the total population is, and that is what the assessment is.
I think it's important it's important to note that sometimes people think it goes up faster than it actually does, because it goes up 2.5% a year based on our vote, but it also goes down if the population of the region increases on a per capita basis.
Right.
And that's why, we've crept up a little bit above 50, but it's nowhere near what it would be if it was just 2.5% a year added on every time. Then we'd be up at 65 or something at this point in time. So that's important to keep in mind as we look toward an adjustment of assessment. At the moment, this year, in the budget, we are likely to focus on an increase in the district local technical assistance line item to enable regional planning agencies across the state to provide more and better services to our cities and towns. In the longer term, we could always go back to the legislature and ask for an increase in the assessment base, but that is a question for the future. At the moment, this is what we have. We think it is reasonable to ask for 2.5% increase. That is well below inflation these days, and it is the maximum we can request. And we are asking for the support or endorsement of the Finance Committee, which would then be relayed to the Executive Committee next Wednesday.
Further questions, comments? If not, I would entertain a motion to support the FY23 assessment as presented to us today.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Yolanda, second by Tabor. And we'll roll call. I'll go in the same order I did before. First of all, discussion, any further discussion?
No, it seems straightforward. I think it makes sense to go with the 2.5%.
Okay. Tabor,
Yes, I agree.
Yolanda,
Yes.
Sam, yes. Motion passed unanimously forward to the Executive Committee with a favorable recommendation.
Yep.
All right, next up, review the draft FY 2022 mid-year budget.
This is actually the main item of the day. So
This is the main item of the day. I know we've talked about a lot of things today, but we are now getting to the
Meat.
meat and potatoes part. So who's going to start us off on the FY 2022 mid-year budget draft?
I'll say a few very quick words, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sheila, which is
Okay.
Sheila and the department heads and the staff and finance have worked very hard on this mid-year adjustment. I've gotten more engaged than I would have if Rebecca were here, obviously. But I kind of think that's actually a good thing for me to do. It's what I used to do years ago. Then Sheila was lucky enough to kind of get rid of me. And now You know, with a new finance director coming on board, it's probably appropriate for me to get a little more into the weeds on some of these items. I've always felt, Sheila knows I started saying this back in November, that this was a very important mid-year budget review because I know it doesn't always feel this way from a public health perspective, but from a finance perspective, we are all coming out of the COVID pandemic into something that is somewhat more normal. Who knows what that really means? But from a financial perspective, it's important to look at our revenues, look at our expenses, and say very clearly, okay, what is changing in the landscape? You know, lots of federal funding. How much of it is coming through to us? What's happening with our city and town budgets? Are they able to replace their lost revenue? In terms of expenses, there are things that have gone down. Like, you know, we're not sending people to conferences right now. Occasionally, they're registering for virtual conferences, which I have found to be completely useless. But sending people on planes to conferences right now. But then again, we're buying kinds of technology that we never even heard of 2 years ago. So I have felt this is a little more important as a mid-year budget review than usual. And we've gone through a very, very thorough process, the result of which is very positive. We are in strong financial shape. We have kept our expenses under control. Our overhead is running well. We have good, strong revenue numbers still from a wide variety of sources. And I think the agency is in very strong financial shape. I want to say, and Sam already knows this, and Sheila knows it, it might be a surprise to Lourdes. I'm not 100% sure if it is or not, but I think it will be good news, is that we have decided and will be announcing today that we are going to do a mid-year salary adjustment for all MAPC staff. This is the first time in the 19 years that I have been at MAPC that we have done a mid-year salary increase. It will be progressive in nature. We have divided the staff into 3 cohorts, and the lowest paid, the currently lowest paid, will be getting a 5% raise, the middle a 4% raise, the more senior a 3% raise. This does not apply to interns. It does not apply to contract workers. It does not apply to any staff that are currently in their 90-day introductory period, and it does not apply to me, but it does apply to everyone else. And I am doing it for a number of reasons. First, because they deserve it. The staff has worked very, very hard under difficult circumstances and often with little recognition over the course of the past 10 years on behalf of our cities and towns and the people who live and work in our cities and towns. Secondly, we know we're going through a period of inflation when everybody's costs are increased. And while we can't necessarily, bend our finances all the time to accommodate that, when we can, we should probably try. And third, hiring is tough these days. And, it's one thing for me to say, well, there's a really great person that I want to get in Department X or Department Y, and we're going to offer a few more $1,000s to get that exceptional talent. But we can't allow those new salaries to run too far ahead of the existing salaries. That wouldn't be fair to our existing staff. So we decided that within the strictures of this budget, it was possible to do this recognition for our staff. And again, once the once the finance committee sends this budget, if you do, to the executive committee, I will feel comfortable announcing that to our staff. I think they'll be very pleased. In my announcement, which I've drafted, I also indicate that nobody should expect this to be an annual event. It's not going to be. We do increases, standard increases, but also exceptional increases based on accomplishment. On July 1st, we'll do that again this year. That will be our regular process. There will not be another special increase in the middle of next year. But I did feel we were able to do it this time around, and that it was the right thing to do. Those are my general remarks, and I'm going to turn it over to Sheila.
All right, Sheila, take us into this budget, unless there are any thoughts on it.
I will try my best to take us into this budget. Mark will need to jump in on the details of the different contracts and projects. I am going to share. Oh, I was going to share my screen. I don't think I can share that.
Is it because you're not the host?
Yeah.
Andrea, can you help with that if you are still on board?
Yeah, she's still there.
So yes, Sheila, you need to be host.
I need to share my screen because I'll be sharing the documents.
Of course, let me make you
Or
host
co-host.
right now.
I think you just made me a co-host because you still need to man the live streaming.
I think you might still be able to share.
Okay, try again.
Seems to be coming up, and there it is.
Great.
Okay, so first up is the summary budget, which summarizes total revenues and expenses. And as we can see, our total revenue went slightly down, but as you can see, that's due to the pass-through. Because the net available for internal operations, which is the amount of money that stays within MAPC to pay the staff, went up $44,000. Going down, we can see where the differences were. Direct labor is increased based on the current staff and the posted positions that are in the budget. Admin labor and employee benefits has gone down slightly. That would be due to many of the empty positions that are there, that are in the budget, and many of the posted positions for replacements are not expected to be hired, probably not until towards the end of this year. So that has decreased that number because a portion of everybody's salary is added to employee benefits. So that has decreased because a full year amount for those open positions are not in the budget. They're in there at a prorated amount. Travel, well, we will go into the details of the overhead budget in a few minutes, but just to give you the general overview, the overhead rate is still at 118%. And that is pretty much all there is to note on the summary page. I don't know if you have any questions specifically before we dive into the details.
Questions by anybody?
I think the
Does this have-
questions will probably be answered in the details. So
Okay. So this is showing the potential raises.
Yes, it includes, it includes about a little over $100,000 that goes towards all those raises that Mark just
Okay. Okay.
Now we'll look at the revenue budget. You're able to see that?
I can see it.
Okay, so it's 4 pages long. The style of it and everything has not changed from what you've seen in the past. We made no changes in assessment from what was entered at the beginning of the fiscal year. Pretty much procurement has remained the same. I will note that Greater Boston Police Council, we did increase that somewhat because we were very conservative at the beginning of the fiscal year, just based on the state of the finances for our cities and towns. But looking at the sales that have come in since the beginning of the year through, I believe I looked through December, we're doing quite well. So we felt that it was it made sense to increase that amount by at least $25,000 because sales have already pretty much hit almost 200,000 through the middle of the year. So that seemed to make a lot of sense. We did not touch FCAM, the Fire Chiefs Association numbers, just because of the situation there. I think, Mark, if you want to know more, I think Mark can explain more about that.
I just think that they're going to remain stable at the moment. It seems that they'll be in pretty much what we originally predicted.
Okay.
The only piece under procurement that's seeing a downturn is our school food contracts, which is too bad because it's one of my favorite line items. But it is honestly suffering from supply chain issues at the moment. We have fewer people able to apply. We did a lot of work with Russo's. I think you all know, everybody in Boston knows that Russo's is closed. And Mark Fine and his team are still committed to getting that back up and running, but it hasn't been something that we can do instantaneously. Everything else, honestly, is flat or positive, and the overall total on collective procurement is up.
Mm-hmm. Moving on down, looking at local technical assistance. The overall number has gone up as well as Mark mentioned in procurement. I think the only one to note, well, let me back up. We have a lot of increases, as you can see, going all the way down. So these are pretty much filling in for many of the miscellaneous that we add in the budget at the beginning of the year. $25,000 line items at different places, either in miscellaneous land use, technical projects, or community engagement, or data services. Those miscellaneous line items have been zeroed out, and now actual projects have been added into the budget to compensate for that. And we have more than what was originally budgeted at 25,000, which was a conservative number at that time.
The only big item here, I think, that's on the law side is our digital services and broadband work, which is a major contract we have with the state on bridging the digital divide, and that's just taken longer to implement. So more of the money was pushed over into the next fiscal year. It's actually going to be a cushion in this category for the next fiscal year, but we couldn't, like a lot of big state-funded projects involving multiple municipalities, it took longer to get it underway than we originally anticipated, so we moved some of that money out. All the other projects, however, have made up for that and made up for the miscellaneous line items that we put in the original budget. And again, the overall total is up.
I just have one question. So there are a couple of specific projects that had an amount and then were negative. Are those projects that we just didn't do for some reason?
I'll take a look at, for example, there's one on the Coffin School in Marblehead. I don't see that. Oh, it's about a third of the way from the top. Oh, that one actually wasn't in the original budget, so it's not a good example.
There was one, the Wakefield 2030 vision.
Okay.
Yeah,
That was
there it
budgeted,
is.
and then it's the same amount is gone. And there was another housing production plan a little further.
I think that's replaced by phase one of the master planning process. We finished the vision.
Okay.
And now we're starting the master planning process.
And let me also explain how the numbers in the budget work a lot of times. When you look at, we're looking at what we're spending in a particular time frame, and a lot of times it's a brand new contract, or it's what's left over from a previous contract. So when you look at it in the next budget, it's no longer there because we spent through it already. Whatever was remaining was spent down. So those would show up as zero. Not necessarily that we lost the money or it disappeared, but we've spent down the grant and the project ended prior to going into this new budget.
And
Okay,
that Wakefield master plan is 34,000 out in the future, has been deferred. So it looks like it's turned into a bigger project anyway.
Yeah.
It is. It's going to be a
Okay.
multi-phase project. We're going to probably stay with them throughout the master plan. And, we'll see it next year as well as this year.
okay. And then the money we see all the way on the right-hand side, that is the referred debt, the revenue deferred to future years. That's a total amount, right? Because like if you look at Good Energy LP right there at the top, 6,000 is deferred, but this year it was only 5,000. So that's an accumulation of multiple years of potential funds that's deferred.
Yes, because that one is fee based. So we're Clean Energy receives a portion of fees as work continues, from the vendors. So
Okay.
she projects that we will get, Cami, who's the director of Clean Energy, projects that we will have additional funds coming in that she will not spend this year. So she's deferring it to next year.
Okay, great.
I have a similar type question while we're in these questions. Back at the Wakefield one, where it was 10,000 in the original budget, then it's decreased by 10,000 and it's zero in the mid-year. Does that mean we got that money, we spent it, and so there's no longer a need to represent it in the mid-year budget? Is that accurate? Is that what happened, or did it just move?
Somewhat. When the initial budget was prepared, which would have been last year, April, going into May, projection based on the contracts that we had in the at that time, it was projected as to what would go into next year, what would carry over into next year, which existing projects would carry over into next year. So some of these projects were existing projects in FY21. And at that time, it was thought that, we might not finish it by the end of FY21. So this is how much is probably, we're probably going to spend into FY22. So that might, so many of these smaller amounts fall into that category. If the staff feels that they're not really going to finish the project at the end of that year, or if the project actually crosses fiscal years and, it's supposed to end like July, but they finished everything in June or at the end of May, but by that time we'd already prepared the budget.
Got it.
Okay. That it was going to carry over.
That's great. Okay, well, let's keep going. I don't want to get us too stuck on all this stuff.
Okay. All right, so let's continue on down. That was the digital one was the biggest one that Mark already talked about. And just to add that most of that deferred amount is pass-through money. It's not money that MAPC is not being able to spend this year internally. Now looking at state grants, I don't know if Mark wants to talk anything about DLTA. The contract amount is just slightly lower than what we had last year. It's literally just slightly over $1,000 that it got reduced. The spending, we usually very slow to start spending at the beginning of the year. So that's why the DLTA 2022 number is at 88. In the past, we budgeted probably about 198,000 at the beginning of the fiscal year. But literally, we recently received the contract. So we're already almost 2 months into the year and have not started spending it yet. So that factors into a lower number of, for spending towards the end of this year, towards the end of, by June 30th. I don't, think of what else to note. Mark, you want to make any notations of any ones in particular, the EEA grants?
Some of these are up and a number of them are down. They are generally down because of the slow process of the state government actually making awards. One of the things that causes a problem is a rush to try and spend money by the end of the fiscal year during the second half of the year, which is hard. I know our cities and towns often face exactly the same problem. I think the numbers are still, reasonably strong. Our EEA smart growth grants are a little bit lower than we anticipated. Our clean energy work is substantially more than we anticipated. And on the whole, I think we're still doing very well with our state contracting, but there is a lot of uncertainty that often comes from the timing of state grant decisions.
So as Mark said, the clean energy is up $382,000. Lots of clean energy projects are coming through, and many of them are just starter projects, so we would expect more to be added to them. Environment, we have several hazard mitigation plans, and many of these that are deferred over here are, I did not put them in the budget because they're still somewhat, they're not here yet. We don't expect to get decisions on those until almost towards the end of the fiscal year. So there'll be barely any spending, but I thought it was important to make sure to list them so we would see that we do have additional work coming through. And the program is moving right along. And we can see the different places that is requiring our assistance. Going to public health, which has grown substantially, especially during the pandemic. Everyone needs our help, and we're here to provide. Mark, I will leave this one up to you.
Well, as you can see, there's an exponential growth in the amount of revenues we've been receiving from individual cities and towns and from DPH, our primary sources, often repeated here. There are some research projects, there are some projects related to health impact assessments, but overwhelmingly, this is work in our cities and towns in regard to COVID response, COVID research and understanding, vaccination efforts, and managing federal funds that are flowing into the public health sector. It's honestly kind of amazing that the public health department is continuing to do as much work as it is being asked to do with a slightly larger staff, but really only one FTE larger than last year. A lot of this money, however, is passed through. And that means that, not as much of it actually gets spent by our staff, but they are managing the process of passing that money through to cities and towns.
Mark, can I just ask, as a more general statement, will COVID aside, and maybe that's a big aside, will this continue in years 3, 4, 5, and 6 from now? Is this a new growth?
So I think actually, Sam, the question is one that's not only relevant to public health, but is relevant to the agency as a whole. The answer is yes and no. For example, a major new commitment was made by the Commonwealth in funding recently for our local public health infrastructure. The legislature is also considering a bill called SAFE 2.0 that I know some of you are familiar with, that will sort of provide the authorizing language to restructure our public health infrastructure on the local level, to establish, for example, just as an example of one of the things included in this, a unified statewide data system for public health reporting, which, believe it or not, we do not really have at the moment. We sort of do, but it doesn't work adequately and it doesn't cover everything. And a lot of communities are collecting a lot of their data in differential ways. So in public health, in economic development, in housing, in climate. There are, for a variety of reasons, additional commitments for long-term expenditures. All that having been said, some of these additional resources owe their existence to federal funds, which may not be there forever. I mean, some of us might have felt that the right thing for the federal government to do is to make some of these things permanent, to begin spending more money in our communities. But I would have to say, in all honesty, I think the temperament in Washington at the moment is the opposite, that we are intending to pull back on public spending and go back to where we were before the pandemic, with all the inequality and inadequate spending that involved. We may not like that, but that's the most likely thing that will happen in Washington over the course of the next several years. So some of this money will stay and some of it will go. And we do not know exactly how much in each of those categories. And we do not know how, what the bottom line is going to be when you add up the pluses and you add up the minuses, subtract the minuses. So, it requires that, on the one hand, we have to always have enough staff on board to spend the money we are receiving to do the functions that our cities and towns require. On the other hand, you can't hire up so fast that if you all of a sudden reach the cliff, you're going to have to lay people off. And that is the balancing act that we are always engaged in at MAPC. And we will continue to be engaged in it. It's only going to be another 3 months less before we bring an FY23 budget before you folks, and we have the next look at what that's going to look like.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Thanks for that. Yeah, interesting. All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going.
All right, so we'll look at public safety. And they are essentially the same grants that we always have, HMCC and the Shannon and the Homeland Security grants. Nothing has drastically changed there.
So just, I look at this and I see the Homeland Security fiduciary for fiscal year 20, that it dropped by $3 million. So I'm not quite sure how what this reporting, if it's, back from 19 and 20, did we then, I'm not quite sure how this reporting is working.
Okay, all right.
Sorry.
Sure.
We can explain that. We've had lots of conversations.
I'm like looking at it going, what?
Yeah. The reason for this is because the contract was extended.
Okay.
So if you see in the deferred, it's been deferred.
Yeah.
$20, because at the time, an extension was not in the works when the budget was initially prepared. And I guess, I would say the timing of completing the FFY 18 funding and the FFY 19 most likely took longer. I would not know. I do not know the details for that. Seeing that the program relies on vendors completing the required work that is assigned by all the different regions. But that would be my explanation for it. Seeing that it's been deferred into next year. Originally, it was supposed to end this year.
Okay. And did we not get anything for 21 and 22 for the Homeland Security fiduciary, or is this just how it's being managed?
The only thing that shows up in the revenue is what we can spend.
Okay.
Because we only count revenue as we earn it. So we might have already received the contract, but because we're not going to spend the contract, it would not be counted as revenue to support the staff in this year, because we're not going to be charging to
Okay. Okay. So will we see these same? Well, no, we won't see 19 anymore, because that looks like it's going to be done as of this year. But we'll see that.
That's what I said. That was my explanation with local technical assistance.
Okay,
We think that we're gonna spend the 395 in this year. That's
Right.
what it looks like. But if for some reason, there's a delay in a vendor or what have you, maybe some of that might end up being spent into next year, and then we'll see
Okay.
that number at a smaller number. And then it will
Okay.
confuse us thinking that, oh, how come we only have 100,000 or
Okay.
whatever.
So we'll see when we do the 23 budget, we'll see this the line item, the fiscal year 20 and maybe the 19. And it'll start for the 2020, it'll start with the 4,041,796.
It would start with what, yes, it should start about that because all of this is an estimate as far as how much we're.
Right. Or thereabouts. Okay.
There might be a slightly different calculation at that time based on what happens over the next 3 months.
Okay.
Mhm.
Great.
And then we
Thank you.
might see 21 also, because 21, we might start tapping into 21 sometime in FY 23.
Okay. Thank you. Now it makes sense to me.
Okay. All right, continuing down and in transportation. We continue to receive money from Mass Development to continue the taxi transportation program. They're into the second or third phase of that program. We received, quite a bit of money from them. And our transportation staff has a full work plan to work on this over the next 2 years. UPWP remains the same. And we have a couple of different bike plans going on. I'm not sure if there are more coming down the pike. One is in Milton, so Tabor, you can tell us if you're going to be seeking more services from us.
Yeah, we probably will be, but I don't know if it's going to be actually bike plan or something rolled into something else. But yeah, we're hoping to get that thing done last year, so hopefully it'll be done this year.
Okay.
I would note that David Lautzenheiser would correct you, Sheila, and say bike plans are not coming down the pike, they're coming down the trail. And I would note it's not bike plan, but it is good news. The so-called bipartisan federal infrastructure bill is going to result in a substantial increase in federal transportation planning allocations, which will probably result in an increase in that UPWP line item of approximately 17%. Probably when the new contract comes into place with the federal fiscal year. So that'll in all likelihood hit on October 1st of 2022. It's not reflected in this budget. It won't even be reflected in the first 3 months of the next budget, but it is coming. And it is probably going to be, just because it's part of federal reauthorization, which was combined with the infrastructure bill, it is reasonably likely to continue well into the future. So Sam, those are one of those resources that I think we'll be able to count on for a fairly long period of time. And a 17% increase in UPWP is a pretty big advance to the resources of our transportation department.
Yeah, interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, other thoughts, comments, questions? I will share with this group since we're on this topic, and I'll be very brief. There's a TED talk. A guy says, "Look at Beijing today," and it's just cars, chocolate block, and it says, "Look at Beijing 1980. It's electric buses, bicycles, and pedestrians." And he said, "What happened? 1980 was the planner's dream of transportation." I'll share it with everybody. Quite fascinating. Anyway, let's press on.
Okay. Now looking at federal grants, we have our 2 EDA grants, our regular planning grant, which is $70,000 a year, and then our CARES grant, which we've had for a couple of years, that would be ending this year. So back to your questions before, why did it go down? It didn't necessarily go down, just at the estimate at the beginning of the year. meant that we spent a little bit more last year. Going into this year, the remainder is actually lower. So it's just a shifting and spending from one year to the next for an ongoing.
Again, it's not reflected in this grant, but people should be aware that we are currently applying for another EDA grant that we are highly likely to receive. It is not CARES money, it is ARPA money, but it is exactly the same amount, $200,000 a year for 2 years. It will take effect when the CARES Act ends. So what we are really going to see out of all of that, in all likelihood, fingers crossed, is $200,000 a year for 4 years. And we're through about one of those years now. So that is another area where we are hoping it's going to continue for a somewhat longer period of time.
Just on that topic, is that planning money that would stay within MAPC, or is that pass through that goes out to community?
Mostly stays within MAPC, maybe a very small amount of pass through.
Right. Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Now down to foundations, looking at the Bar Foundation. We pretty much have all the same grants that were in the original budget. The amounts were just adjusted, some based on spending from last year and what is expected to be spent this based on what we thought was carried over into FY22 to a more definite number at this time halfway through the year of what is expected to be spent and what is expected to be carried over next year. I would note that we are expecting another bar grant for mobility and climate, which is split between our strategic initiative department and clean energy. Most of that is going to be spent next year. A small amount will be spent towards the end of this year once we actually do receive it.
And we'll receive that grant in March. That's when the board is meeting. That will be another 3-year grant at, I believe, $1 million a year. Sheila, if you were done with this part, I'm actually going to let you go through other grant support, and then I'll have a general comment about why so many of these numbers are going down.
Okay. And then these are additional grants or other type of supports. I don't, many of these were already similar to the existing bar grants. They're existing grants now. The one that I would like to note is the Connie Family Foundation grant. They initially, for the landline initiative that goes to our transportation department, they initially gave us $75,000 to Metro Future Inc. Metro Future Inc., of course, hires MAPC to actually do the work. But this past November, they gave us another grant for $550,000 in addition to that $75,000 over a 3-year period to continue that work.
So let me say, I'm sorry, Sheila, were you done, or did you have something else to say on?
Yeah, I'm finished.
So a couple of things. First of all, the Conine Foundation, or the Conine Family Foundation, that's Wayfair, just for you to be clear. I think it's actually not the only foundation established by Wayfair founders, but it is one of them. They're very interested in bikes and trails. We've been doing a tremendous amount of work with them. They are considering us to be a core partner in their region and are giving us a fair amount of money for a lot of this work. Tabor, a portion of this work is actually going to be in Milton and Mattapan. But it's
part of the Greenway, right?
Yeah, it's a great new effort for us. There was one item that really went down substantially, the National Science Foundation, which you see about 4 or 5 from the bottom, went down $300,000. We were working with Professor Joe Ferreira at the Department of Urban Studies and Planning, which some of you may know, on this major grant application. It did not come through. To be perfectly frank, I'm not 100% sure why it was in for such a large amount in the initial budget, because it was speculative, but it did not come through. So that's the loss there. But the main point I want to make is in regard to like a lot of much smaller, but usually negative numbers. Sheila often hears me say that at the moment at MAPC, I am much more worried about not having enough people than I am about not having enough money. And when you don't have enough people, and they finally decided about 7 or 8 o'clock at night that they're going to stop working, and they can only charge 37.5 hours a week anyway, you just don't have enough to spend the money that's already come through in your contracts, or in some cases in your bank account. And what tends to happen is that, well, you got to spend the money with city and town because, you know, Ashland wants its project finished. And you got to spend the money with the state because the state has hard deadlines of spending money by the end of the fiscal year or the calendar year. And you don't want to cross the feds because the feds can always be years and years behind, but you have to be exactly on time. So what ends up happening is you don't spend the money that comes to you from foundation grants, because they're the easiest. They're the, you know, they ask you for a report, but if you have to roll it over, you can generally roll it over. And that's why so many of these go negative. It's not because the contract isn't there. It's not even that the money isn't there. Sometimes the money is actually in the bank. But as Sheila indicated, we don't recognize it until you charge against it. And I'll be honest, we're spending our bar money too slowly. And so far, they've been very tolerant. Maybe someday they won't be. And so we need to be adequately staffed up to spend the foundation money as well as all the other money. And that is just an ongoing issue that we are struggling with. It's a good problem to have. It's better than being broke or having people who are not performing. We don't have either of those problems. But we do have a problem keeping up with the demand for our services. And that's going to be an ongoing effort to fill positions. I'll be honest with you. You know, part of the effort to increase salaries is partly focused on that. It's being able to get people in and get them, you know, get them applying, get them into interviews, and get them to say yes fast.
I guess just on that, as a more general statement, do you ever get to a point where it gets too far out of whack? You just have too much work in the queue. You've always got the space limit, the physical space limitations that you're grappling with. It's hard to hire. It's probably going to be hard to hire for a while still. I mean, at least for the next 6 to 12 months. I don't know. I'm more of a general question.
Yeah, we don't. It doesn't shut us down or stop us, Sam. It's not that severe. It's just something we always have to be working on and anticipating.
Right.
So
yeah.
we
Okay.
manage it as best we can.
Yeah.
You know, we're in the odd situation in the office right now. We probably already have too many people for the space we have. And you know, Angela Howard is constantly telling me no more room, no more room, no more room. And I'm constantly looking at her and saying, there's no one in the office. Who cares? Someday we're going to come back to the office. And I think, you know, I'm going to be sharing my office with an intern or something like that. So.
I will say that in relation to the whole budget there, in looking back over the years that I've been doing this, it's remarkable how close we are to our actual budget, and the fix that we're looking for, the mid-year fix, is, in my memory, has always been much more significant than it is this year, despite the fact that we've got some of these things that are way off. It's I'm surprised that it's somewhat remarkable that we're on pretty close to on target.
Yeah. Folks, I am going to have to depart this meeting. I don't know if there are any other issues that people wanted to discuss with me. I think that Sheila can obviously guide you very well through the expenses and indirect. If any of you have questions for me, feel free to call or email me. Yolanda, I actually forwarded to you by email a little more detail on the Homeland Security spending issue.
Oh, great. Thank you.
It is my hope that you will vote to recommend the mid-year budget at this meeting. to the executive committee, and that with, I think, all of you present, we will be taking it up at the executive committee meeting next Wednesday, although obviously in much less detail.
Right.
Anything else for me?
Just one quick question, Mark.
Sure.
Have you considered, you're saying when you get everybody back, you may not have space. Are you considering the possibility of not making everyone come back all the time and then they could share space? Or, because I think,
Yeah.
a lot of
reopening-
companies are not going to have everyone come back.
The reopening plan at the moment, Yolanda, calls for the following: that the office was closed during Omicron, very few people going in.
Right.
I am expecting within a week or two, we will reopen partially, or voluntarily, which was the status we had through the fall, summer and fall.
Right.
Where, my guess is 10 to 15% of the staff will be in at any given point in time. Then we will we hope, God willing, reopen fully. Fully reopening doesn't mean everyone comes back every day. The minimum number of days will be 2 days per week.
Great.
The minimum number we would like people to come back is 3 days a week. So if you are there 2 days a week, perfectly fine, but you won't have your own space. You'll need to share. The harder question we're going to have to deal with is whether or not people coming back 2 days a week are going to get T-passes or not. I don't think they will, but we're not sure about that yet. But if you're there 3 days a week, if you commit to that, then you'll have your own space and you'll have your T-pass as well. Very few people are going to be there more than 3 days a week. There are a few people. I might be one of them, but most people won't. And so the office, I think it would be extraordinary if we had a day when 50% of the people were in the office.
Right.
I'm not sure I'll ever see that again, honestly. So that is one of the ways we're going to be dealing with the space issue.
Okay.
We also have to consider whether or not we need more space. And
Right.
we do have, our leases, I believe, up in 2024. So very, very soon, like in the next few months, we need to start the process of considering whether we're staying there, whether we are trying to amend our footprint within the building, or whether we're moving somewhere else.
Okay.
Men's Warehouse has never come back to the bottom of 60 Temple Place, however. I've heard rumor that there might be a marijuana dispensary there. But, maybe MAPC would be a better tenant down on the first floor. We could put community engagement there.
Yeah.
Emily could run Metro Common trainings right outside of Macy's. That's a possibility. And then, of course, there's my favorite one, which I know Sheila is particularly a fan of, which is opening a roof garden up above the 6th floor. So no, I'm just kidding about that. But we may need more space. That's the serious part of this conversation.
Right,
We may need
right.
more space, and we're probably going to consider that more in terms of our 2024 lease. It's not something over which we have a lot of control in the short term. Any other questions for me? All right.
Hearing none, Mark.
I'll see you all very soon. Again, big thanks to Sheila and the entire team for providing this budget. And I hope you'll give it your support.
Great.
Take care, folks.
Bye,
Thank you,
Mark.
Mark.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, Sheila, we're back to you, I think, unless there are other questions at this point, to take us through the expense budget, the expenditure budget.
Okay.
You already have queued up, so why don't we jump right into that?
Okay. Well, we talked about it a little bit when we were reviewing the summary. When we talked about this number. I explained this decrease is due to the factor that we have several open positions that are not expected to be filled until probably towards the end of the fiscal year. So there's only 2 or 3 months worth in here versus the whole year. Because there's been a lot of as you guys have heard in the executive committee meeting, there's been a lot of turnover as it is in so many other companies during this pandemic. And it's affected these numbers. Also, admin temporary help, we've increased that substantially. One, to help cover administrative temporary help during Heidi Anderson's absence, as you have heard. We wish her well, as well as the temp grant accountant that is currently working in the finance department. And then transit passes, we initially bumped that up at the beginning of the year when we thought that we were going to come back to the office and so forth and so on. So I dropped that down. The facilities, rent escalations, maintenance, repairs, even though we are not fully in the office, we're still paying rent. We're still paying escalations. They've included the capital expenditures for the new beautiful elevators and increased our escalation for operations expenses. The real estate escalation went up slightly too because of the new assessment of the building. And, we continue to expand on our technology, on our IT needs while we're working remotely, whether it be to help with the staff, help with the infrastructure, with additional online tools to help us with our projects. So that has increased immensely as well. I added more to recruiting and personal services, because as Mark said, with me departing, he's considering getting additional help, getting a consultant, getting a headhunter, recruitment to not just fill my position, but also help to assess the restructuring of the department. So it made sense to increase that. I increased legal fees. Actually, Mark should have been here to explain this. We're currently going through, we've been sued. Not for a procurement matter. Unfortunately, I cannot provide all the details of that. But
well, I think we just leave it at that. We've been sued on a procurement matter, and I think we can explore that more as needed.
Yes.
The last thing we were sued on was another procurement matter. It's like 2 years ago.
Well, it's a vendor that was not chosen and felt that they should have been chosen or something like that.
Right. I think that's what it was. It was that somebody opened the bidding in the wrong time, or I can't remember what it was. And we were right, but it turns out the law was so vague that the judge threw it out. And we ended up paying for it. It was, it was fairly costly. I think that was a couple of years ago. Probably. It doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
Well, this one is still ongoing. And we had to hire an outside attorney, for this. Margie is involved, but she's so closely tied to it. We needed someone outside as well, seeing that she's part of the process. Let's see. Subscriptions and publications. This was just increased because I ran the numbers and looked to see that the number was a little low, because this includes online subscriptions. So that's, that's up. Mark is looking, in addition to him giving the raises, the mid-year raises, he's also looking to do a salary survey again. We did one maybe when Rebecca was here about 3-4 years ago. So obviously everything's changed, the world has changed. And between him and Angela, they're looking to get a compensation consultant to make sure that we have equity across the agency, across the staff, as well as making sure that we can be competitive with what is actually out there. We also have a strategic plan. It's time for us to renew our strategic plan. And that is money in there to help with the beginning of that process. It is expected to be maybe about a 1-year process, 9 month to 12-month process. Mark is currently in the process of picking the team, the project team who would lead this and prepare the RFP to procure a consultant. And he's hoping that that can start moving by April, that we would have already have the RFP out there and be able to hire a consultant by April.
So that was going to be my question. Both of these show up in the mid-year adjustment. So the thought at any rate is that this money will at least begin to be spent this fiscal year.
Yeah, Mark, I mean, I was a little doubtful and did not want to put it into the budget, but Mark felt that, they were pushing hard enough that it would probably start before, before by April. And there would be some cost before the end of the fiscal year.
Right. So just have that reflected in the budget, in the adjusted budget. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Because the total, he's estimating that the total might be $150,000.
Oh.
But we don't know. I mean, that's what his estimate is, because he's also that's for the combined strategic plan and DEI assessment, which is something new that we've never done before.
It makes sense to add these in at this point with everything going on with one trying to keep staff, trying to get staff, and just the conversations that are happening around DEI. So I think it's good to put at least a little bit.
So much bigger now than it used to be too.
Oh yeah.
That's really grown.
Yeah. And then the last thing is, depreciation. I dropped that down some because we don't necessarily have a lot of capital assets that at that high level of depreciation expense. And that is about it. So
well, that's amazing.
2000.
That's amazing. Depreciation is one of those things I am no expert on. So if anybody has questions on that, and more just in general, maybe we unshare the screen. Is everybody okay with these numbers when we unshare the screen? And
By me.
if I can find my buttons. Why can't I find my buttons? Unshare. That's weird.
Tabor, it sounded like you were about to make a motion. I don't know.
Well, actually, I was just about to ask also about the audit, and I don't know where do you guys stand on that, and what's the timing on the results from that? Will that be available for the minute meeting?
Oh, actually, yeah, that should have been part of the agenda. I apologize. So we'll have that under other business, not known at the time of the agenda, even though I saw.
Right. Well,
maybe we should get this part out of the way, though. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, let's finish the budget process and then.
All right.
Okay.
So any other general comments, questions, thoughts on this? And if not, I would entertain a motion that the Finance Committee recommend favorably to the Executive Committee the mid-year budget adjustment as presented today.
So moved.
Second.
Yolanda moves, Tabor
Yep.
seconds.
Yep.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call. Tabor,
Yes, I agree.
Yolanda,
Yes.
Sam, yes. Approved unanimously by the Finance Committee. Closing that portion, we have one other, which is other business not known at the time of the posting of this agenda. And Tabor, you were raising a question about the audit. Maybe follow up, continue on that line of thought.
Well, I'm just the annual audit, and I know it should be coming out around this time of the year, or up in the next. We should be able to review it in the next month or so. Just wanted to know where that was and what kind of progress we've made.
Sheila, can you help us?
Sam?
So, go ahead. Can you?
Well, actually, there is news on that. unfortunately, because this has been such a difficult year, the audit has actually been delayed. With my loss in staff in October and, Rebecca, it's been a little crazy. So we've been a little behind. We are just now in the middle of the audit. Normally I would have started in November. I would have prepared everything in October, started in November. I delayed it to January. And then unfortunately I had a death in my family. So I was out for a couple of weeks. So that delayed it even more. But we are thick in the middle of it. We're right in the middle of it all. I supplied all the information, 99% of the information to the auditors as of last week. So they pretty much have everything. I think I have one big last report that I have to prepare for them to complete the single audit of all the different types of grants. And for them to report that to the federal clearinghouse. But it should all be completed by March 31st. That is our deadline. We cannot go beyond that, or else we will be considered high risk and be tested to the hill next year. But yeah, it's just been delayed, but it is on track to be completed before it's actually required.
Further thoughts on that?
No, I just thought we won't have a chance to discuss it or ask about it for another couple of months. So I figured it'd be better to ask now.
Yeah.
No, it should have been something that I should have put that on the agenda because it's something that needed to be noted to this committee because this is an unusual circumstance. We are usually at this time we are trying to wrap it up and just going through last minute questions, and that's not the case this year. So thank you for raising it.
Yeah, and then the only thing I'll say, just as we close out other businesses, Sheila, it occurs to me as you consider your finishing up at MAPC, there's so much knowledge that you have, and some of these processes I think are quite complex. Like it just occurred to me, the audit and all the different categories that you have to manage. So please transfer that knowledge onto whoever's going to be next, because I know for one, I'll have plenty of million questions. And so I hope that person can answer them as well as you've been able to answer them. So that's just more of a request than anything else.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I don't think, my decision is not, was not, I've been thinking about this decision for a good couple of years. It's not, I have not made this in haste. And Mark was somewhat aware that I was thinking about this, but not knowing that it was definite to move forward, to start moving forward. So I felt it was important to at least give several, a good amount of time notice versus 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I don't think that was appropriate just because of the many different things that I'm involved in. Yeah.
I know.
Certainly appreciate your notifying us as far in advance as you can, because I haven't gone through it with Harry, and you were right there with it the whole time. And that was hard enough. So I'm glad we've got you at least for another couple of months. So thank you for that.
Yeah, definitely.
Indeed. With that, I would, if there's no other business, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Tabor moves, Yolanda seconds. No, any discussion? None. Roll call. Tabor.
Aye, sir.
Yolanda.
Yes.
Sam, yes. We are adjourned at 1:43 p.m. Thank you all. Thank you, Sheila, again.
Yes,
Thank
Sheila,
you all.
thank you. Thank you. And if we don't see you before your before you leave, thank you for all you've done. Sorry for the loss that you had, and you will be missed.
You
Well,
will be missed.
I'll be at the next executive committee meetings. Over the next-
Okay, good, good.
And
Great.
thank you, Lourdes.
Income statements.
Thanks. Thank you, Lourdes.
All
Thank
right.
you. And thank
Yeah,
you,
thank you
Andrea.
too, Laura.
Thanks, Andrea.